Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Ghosts and Spirits Encounters video. I thought I would mix this one in here while I'm continuing to do your cryptids and monsters suggestions. This one comes from the reddit.com website. They're from the subreddit Shadow People. It's from a user by the name of Least Confection 536, but it was the title that immediately got me hooked. In fact, they titled theirs as I Tried to Fight a Shadow Person. Talk about a catchy title, right? This is definitely something where you want to read the information and then see what this user states. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll do that here. I'll give my own thoughts and opinions. I'm sure somewhere along the way I'll be stating how almost like it's a no-no, impossible no-no to do something like that. Like you do not want to do anything as far as fighting a shadow person, but let's see the reasons why they stated this. And then of course, if you wanted to put your own comments, I'd love to hear what that is as well. So here's what they stated. Yeah, I know that title is odd, but there's a story behind this. I play Airsoft in Ireland. My team are mostly Russians. I'm the only Irish guy, and we were at a 24-hour game. And so we were making our way to a building through a forested area. It was hot. It was 12 p.m. And then all of a sudden, it got really, really cold to the point that my rifle felt like ice. I said this to the lads, but they didn't take much notice. They just continued to talk each other about the objective. And so I had seen about 3 or maybe a few meters away, I'd seen something in this move. And so I asked my friend, and then I tried to make sure if he could check it out and take a look around. He told me no one is there. And so anyways, after that, a few hours went by. So I got separated from the group and I ended up in a long building. Now in a cellar room, it's so quiet. My own comms aren't working. And so I told my friends where I was at least, and they said, hey, I could make my way back to the camp. And as I was doing so, it suddenly got really, really cold again to the point that I started feeling sick and a little weary. And so feeling that this was going to happen, I felt like terrified. It was the worst feeling of my life, in fact. And so I started looking around, at least with my rifle. I had my torch near my eyeline as well. And I started moving my rifle, pointing at least towards the same area that I was detecting something. And so I turned around and I heard these large boots stepping around me. I now yelled out, who's there? And so I'm out of the game. Anyone that was there didn't answer, but I headed down a hallway with some rooms, and then I popped some little lights, some chemical lights here and there, tossing one into each room as I passed them. Now it's about 3 a.m., and at this time, it's pitch black darkness. No one is shooting. I didn't hear anyone else. And so I started thinking everyone has probably gone to sleep or went back to the camp. All of a sudden, I heard a big bang in the room next to me. And so I pointed my rifle and I lit the door with the light that I had. And then up there was a hole in the room, except for one spot that the light didn't affect. It didn't make any sense to me. It was like it was this shadow. And as if I was pointing the light towards a person, but no one was there. But there was something or someone that was causing a shadow, even though they weren't there. But it was definitely a person's shadow against the wall. It was about 6.5 feet tall. It had these legs that it looked like, but it was crouching at the same time. I could see some features, including long hair, almost like a thick hair that was moving. It had these shadow type broad shoulders. It had this shadow like head as well that was actually long and thin. And then the shadow ended up moving so fast to the point that I lost it. It was at this point also that my bones started hurting. My mouth became dry. My heart started beating a mile a minute. I tried to adjust my rifle around to catch the shadow again, but now it was in the hallway, at least the hallway that I just came from. And so I turned fully in that direction, pointing the light and then also my rifle at that black shadow in the hallway. And at this point, I'm close to pissing myself. I tried to use my comms again, to no joy. No one was answering whatsoever. And so I'm there, eyes glued to this figure. I yelled at it several times and moved really, really fast down the hallway. And for some reason, I didn't think to run away. I just pretty much stayed there, and then I started following it, thinking, what the F is this thing? And then all of a sudden, it stopped being a shadow against the wall, but was now a shadow standing right in the middle of the hallway. In fact, the hallway was filled with my light, but this thing, the darkness that was there, was standing right in the middle of the hallway, not moving at all. And so I continued to yell at it, and I don't know what it was expecting to do. And then all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, it moved yet again into another room. The shadow tilted as it went head first into this room. I heard some sniggering, almost like a really creepy laughing, but not loud. It was very quiet. It was almost as if it was a sound from a mile away, but it was actually coming from that room itself. And so I put my rifle on the ground, and now with my torch pointing down towards the hallway, I took out my spare Surefire Touch and an old AKM bayonet off of my knees there, where I kept in my knees area. And so now I'm feeling weak. I'm freezing. I'm thinking of my son. I'm thinking how I shouldn't be an atheist. And so I'm afraid to move. My brain is basically fight or flight at this point. Those instincts started to kick in. And then now it was time for a fight. And so I ran into that room yelling, ready to do I don't know what. And all of a sudden I felt an anger I've never felt before. It took over and it canceled out my fear. It was empty. It was like I had there was no feeling at all afterwards. As far as my body started to feel warm again, my sweat was no longer there. There was this ice water that was on my skin. It was like someone pushed up the temperature in just a second. And I went from seeing my breath to it being normal, again at least. And so I went and I picked up my rifle and I sprinted back towards my camp. I came across 4 of the guys that were there from the enemy team. I asked them if they knew if anyone was up there where I was, and they said no. Everyone was back at the camp. They asked me why, and I told them I'd seen a guy. And so they checked on their comms, at least if there was anyone missing from their group. No one was missing. I think they could tell that I was a little off, and then I felt like blank and I felt like twitchy. And so I said thanks and then went back to the compound, and then that's where I went to my camp. Everyone was there. They were drinking a beer, eating food. I'm now asking around why no one would answer me on my comms, and they said they didn't answer. They did answer me earlier, but that no one was up there at the same time with me for my team. Now my radio has a long range antenna, and so I should be able to get a signal at least up to 3 to 5 kilometers away. And so I just put this experience behind me and ate some food. I drank some beer, chatted for an hour or so, and then we all went to bed. And then I woke up at 5:22 a.m. I remember because I was looking at my phone and I got that feeling again. It suddenly got very cold again. And so I opened up my tent and I pointed my light out, at least towards the trees, and then I suddenly skimmed past a shadow against a very large tree. And so I put my touch on the figure there, or I put my torch on the figure there, and at this point I don't really feel very scared. I'm now actually drunk as blank, and I remember yelling, "Will you just F off?" And then closing my tent. I cracked open a can, downing it, and then passing 5 minutes later. I woke up now around 8 a.m. and everyone was awake. They were talking, they were eating. I was hungover, and so I ended up getting some coffee. And so I started talking to a friend, and he told me he had seen a shadow right outside his tent. In fact, he opened his tent to see nothing like it as well. And so there he was kneeling down towards the entrance at the tent, but no one was there. He expected to be face to face to another person when he was unzipping the tent, only to meet the shadow there in that open space. I tried telling him about the last night, but I stopped myself. I didn't need to look like a crazy person or look like I was making this blank up. And so I said it didn't matter, and I walked away. So yeah, long story short, I tried to F up with either a ghost or a shadow man. I still remember the features of this shadow person. Definitely around 6.5 feet tall, some bent or crouched legs, so maybe it was even taller. And then it had these physical features as if it was a full-blown shadow, but its head was a bean, like it was in a long shape of a bean. It had this long hair as well, hair longer than some of the others sides as well, the normal sides. In other words, its limbs were long and thin, as if it was malnourished. So thin, in fact, it was difficult to explain if I could see most of it. But I couldn't see the shadow it formed, but it still gave me all the details that I needed. Then that's it. That's everything that this user Least Confection 536 mentioned in their encounter. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. First off, I had to move a lot of the words around because it looks like for this user they might be international, and so English might not be their first language, and so I tried to play it up as best as possible, and I hope it made sense with regards to that. But it looks like essentially they were playing something called airsoft, which I imagine is those paintball guns. Someone let me know if that's the case. And then they were out there in two groups, and then there he was moving into some area with a building. It sounded like it was an abandoned building with a cellar. And so when he was moving down into that location, that's when he described getting the worst feeling of his life. He had his rifle with him. He had what he kept describing as a torch, which I'm guessing was his light as well. I don't know if it was on the rifle itself or if it was separate from the rifle, but then that's when he saw it. He saw this shadow person basically come out from one of the areas. It moved around really quick at certain points. He saw it at other points right next to the wall, as if something was standing next to the wall, but it was casting a shadow. And then finally, he saw the shadow person itself, like in other words, standing in midair, basically right out of thin air, right there in front of him. It had some unique features too, obviously like the usual darker than dark aspect, the long thin arms and so on, but it had hair. How about that? That's a first when it comes to this type of experience, when it comes to something as far as long hair moving through its broad shoulders. So I never really heard of that one before. Somebody posts in the comments if you know about that info. Do shadow people have hair as well? And then this thing moved finally to another room. And then this guy, again, as I was mentioning at the beginning, I don't think this is the right thing to do. He started to run towards it. Like he wanted to yell at it and then be all bravado about it. This stuff is no. Like this stuff is really bad. You don't want to have this kind of stuff essentially going to another level when it comes to their mood or something else. Like if they look at you, that seems to be the most common thing that I read in all these encounters. That's about it. Maybe some do some more dangerous things, but otherwise you don't want to antagonize it. But that's what this guy was doing. It made sense too that it decided to come back to him the next morning. It was like around 5:22 a.m. and he got that eerily cold feeling again in his tent. And when he looked out, there it was right there, staring right at him as if it was going to do something. So all around, it's a unique experience. Definitely something that is hair raising. That is, you can see this guy. His quote was how he shouldn't be an atheist. Kind of sums it up on his end. All of a sudden, he realized there was a whole different universe out there that he probably never considered. But now there he was dealing with it. He tried to fight it, but it moved away, and then now he was getting a second visit from it, but that's about it. But if anyone else has any more info, let me know. Post those comments below. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.